Welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast on the cosmos from independent validator teams. Hello everybody, welcome to Game of Nodes, the podcast by independent validators of the cosmos. So today we have Sunny coming to join us, but he's running a little bit late. So introductions of our regular participants that are here today. So we've got Usurper and Schultze and myself, Null. And Sunny is joining us. He's just running a little bit late. So we thought that we would start the show and we would just do a few follow-up questions, talk a bit of shit, and discuss random questions from the audience if you guys have any. So sorry about the delay. But let's get down to it. So do either of you guys have any questions that have been asked this week that you think we should be looking into? Maybe the Validator Commons usurper? Maybe do we want to touch on the two groups that have sort of formed in the last week or so, and then maybe discuss a little bit about some benefits and pitfalls of going down this route?
Yeah, we can. So Schultze and I were both actually just in a call with the Validator Commons group, which is, I'm not sure what the origins are of that. Actually, I just met one of the principals from that this morning, who's actually in the town where I live, which is pretty fascinating. It's always interesting to run into people, you know, like in the crypto space in real life, when it's not like at a giant show and things like that.
I tell you, there's some weird thing about Pennsylvania and crypto.
There could
I've
be.
run
I don't
into
know.
so many people that are from Pennsylvania and do crypto. Yeah,
we should share address books. I like to meet more folks. So anyway, I think the Commons group. There's some really large and prestigious validators, and like Chorus One is in there, and Stakefish, and there's others in there as well. And that group is I don't want to speak for them because you can go look at. I think it's Validator. You know what this is. Let me find that. I'll find the link as we talk about it. But they trying to work on solving some different problems and trying to be able to provide some research and other types of data sources to the cosmos. I think is a good way of saying it. And they also, I think the background of that group is outside of even crypto. We're starting to talk about just governance in virtual worlds. And then now the cryptocurrency piece has really kind of driven that a lot since we've had not just in the cosmos, but across the whole space around different types of governance and kind of ownership components and challenges, right? And how do you start building up a governance structure that makes sense? So that group, I think originally might have started a little bit more around the balance of validator groups and maybe project foundations and just kind of like project leadership areas. And then that's one team that's been discussing, I think, for a while. And then recently, we had another group that's formed really more grassroots. And I know Whisper Node really drove this. And also, help me out, guys. Who else drove that initially?
Thybor was also a big proponent of it.
Thyborg as well. And so that started a group called Cosmos Validators, which has a Discord. And actually, there's a decent amount of Cosmos Validators in that Discord now, right? There's a bunch of people in there. And that, I think, is also talking similar types of areas, just maybe a little bit different focus. That focus, I think, has been, we talked about a little bit this last week, but that focus has been a little bit more around almost like validator self-policing or finding ways to be able to better share validator information out to delegates and others, which is, again, I think everybody wants the same goal. It's just different ways of talking about that and kind of different areas of the problem. So, and now these groups have been starting to discuss more, and there's opportunities for maybe finding better ways to, communicate and kind of build some structure around it. And I don't think anybody's trying to necessarily, change the structure of governance completely. I think both groups, and I don't know if we got that. I don't know if I'm fair enough on this conclusion yet, but I would say that the Cosmos Validator Group is kind of focusing more around providing delegators better information and allowing validators to be able to provide other information than just voting power on how they might choose to delegate with someone, which I think is totally valuable because there's so many great projects that validators do that you would never, unless you're in this business like 100% of the time, you would never know what that is, right? And how do you see some of those just by accident, right? And then on the common side, I think they're trying to find ways to be able to work with foundational groups to better say, what does a healthy validator set look like, and what are some of the proponents of that, and how do you work it from that angle? So I don't know if that's the reason I'm kind of hesitating on being more specific is because I don't think any of this has been figured out, right? We're just kind of in the early part of the process.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know too much about the Validator Commons yet. I haven't looked into that. I was talking to Jake yesterday morning, and he actually asked me what I thought about it, but I misunderstood and thought he was talking about the Cosmos Validators League, and then so started to ramble shit about that for 20 minutes. So I think what the Cosmos Validators League, if that's what it's called, or maybe it's just called Cosmos Validators
I think they changed it as Cosmos Validators, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what they're trying to do there has some merit. I think that the way validators are presented to the public needs to be improved. Specifically, like when you go to any of the major staking platforms, they're just ranked by power, right? And inherently, because of conditioning of other things, when users come and they see a list and they're uneducated about validating or how proof of stake works, they think bigger is better, and I want to be on the big boat because it's got less chance of sinking and my funds are more safe. Whereas that's wholly not the case. Most validators are sound throughout most of the Cosmos. There's a small percentage that get jailed occasionally, right? So as far as getting your funds slashed, it's a reasonably low risk across the board. And like you say, there are so many validators that do so much for the networks they validate on. And that's not all of them. Some don't do anything. They just turn on their validator and sign blocks, and that's fine as well, because that's the job. People who add extra value are going above and beyond, right?
Yeah.
So the big question is how is it presented to the public, and how do you get the public to recognize the value from other people? And that's the hard part, because the staking platform is like an intermediary between the user and the network, right? So you're introducing like a point where there can be manipulation for profit, and any ranking system is going to be subjective. So, I mean, you've got on-chain metrics, which are not that subjective. You can, they're calculable. But, I mean, even if you use those, if you want to give certain things a certain weighting, they can even be manipulated to improve the score of, certain validators. Like, say, if, for example, you put a high weight to providing ancillary services like RPCs, LCDs, relaying, that type of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Then those validators are going to get a higher score, right? But if you put a lower rate, they're going to get a lower score. If you put a higher weight on voting, validators that vote will get a higher score against others. So everything you pick and choose and do in there is subjective, and it's all manipulatable to make certain validators look good and other validators look bad. So if they do go down that route, and if it does become a popular way of selecting validators, they really need to be sure that what they're providing is something that is simple and it's not too like exclusionary to people who just want to sign blocks. And yeah, I just think it's a very important thing to make sure that you get right. Otherwise, you might as well just have the current system.
I think you make a lot of really good points. To a certain extent, I kind of see the way Crescent did it as the ideal situation. Not exactly, because what they do is if you use their platform to hit stake, they'll stake with like the top 11, right? and wants to get anything below that. So that's not ideal. That means it's just focusing centralization. But the idea that if you stake through their platform, it kind of chooses from a variety of validators and kind of weights them and stuff, such that effort can be put into other areas rather than just marketing what you do, I think is a really compelling way of handling distribution. And I think that the idea that going with the top one because it's the safest is actually a really interesting idea, because if you think about staking rewards, like let's take Juno, right now staking rewards, I think 90 or 100%. If you're slashed, you lose 0.01% of your staking rewards, right? Or of your stake. That means you're losing like an hour and a half of your stake. So the fact that you're choosing someone so high up in order to be safe is you're saving an hour in order to focus voting power higher. And so it's this really weird dynamic that is kind of unexpected. People talk about all these slashing, downtime slashing, but the penalty for that is so low, it's almost not even worth talking about.
Right. I also think
just to cut in. So Sunny's actually joined us here. I'll bring him up here. Sunny, we're talking about some other stuff, but we will introduce you in a tick and get going on with the show. But I think this is still pretty interesting to continue on with here. So welcome, Sunny.
Hey, Sunny.
I have a lot of thoughts on Validator decentralization.
You are really, really quiet, man. Can barely hear you.
Yeah, see if you can bump it up.
Is this better? Test. 1, 2.
Yeah, a little bit higher.
Keep going, more gain.
Higher. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, good. Cool.
Okay, there you go.
Perfect. Yeah, cool. Sorry, I'm late. I took a nap and then lost track of time by accident. But sorry about that. You guys are talking about validator decentralization?
Yeah. So everybody, this is Sunny. Sunny's from Osmosis. We'll get a self-introduction from him a little bit later on. We'll just continue the conversation we were having from Schulte. And Sunny, the way this format works is we just sit here and talk shit until we get sick of talking shit. So if you want to jump in and you've got any good insight or comments about what we're talking about, and just jump in and have at it. So, yep. All right, Schulte, continue.
I mean, I think that was basically what I had to say, is that downtime slashing is almost irrelevant in the greater scope of staking rewards. So trying to focus your stake higher up because it's so much safer is kind of not a fallacy, but it's kind of misguided.
One thing I think that would, a proposal that we had a while ago in Cosmos, I don't know if it ever got finished to be implemented, but like the slash should really be proportional to the size of the validator or the amount of nodes, like power that's offline. So if you are like delegated to a 10% validator versus a 1% validator, and that 10% validator goes offline, then really that slash should be like 10x more than if you were delegated to a 1% validator that went offline. So I think that kind of will help smooth it out. So that way, not just the amount is more, but it's like, kind of like a square kind of thing almost like.
Yeah. These are the ideas. No, I was going to say, these are ideas that like, that's a great idea. Like there's a lot of these types of things where you can make some either governance changes or other types of things to drive specific behavior. So what we were talking about, Sunny, before you joined was there's a kind of a group called Validator Commons that we've been talking to a little bit. And like, I think Jake's been on there and Schulte and I were on there today a little bit, just kind of understanding what the goals are there. And you have great validators, like Course One and Stakefish and those types of things. And then you have this, we were just talking about the Cosmos Validators Discord group, which is from Thyborg and Whisper Nodes really driving, and just having kind of more conversations there. That's a little bit more grassroots from like validators just talking about other validators and things like that. But I think the goal is, and what we were saying before is, and what Noel's concerns was, like if you start building ranking on things that are very qualitative, right? And what you said, like Noel, is like, how do you weight like these different contributions to the ecosystem? You just get into another bad ranking system, right? And then you also have another UX issue. Like one of the goals of these teams was to say, all right, so if we don't do ranking, what we could do is just be able to provide more data to the delegator to make proper decisions around what value has been applied, right? But if I think about that, and if you have 100 and I forget what it is on Osmosis, right? 150 or 135 validators, and if I have an Excel spreadsheet of 135, and that's how many rows there are. And if I look at 12 columns across, because everyone's talking about RPC nodes and what projects they've done, and I did a pull request on a docs site one time, then you have this information overload where you can't really build UX around that to help people make decisions anyway, right? So there's problems on both sides of this, which is it's difficult to bring and kind of build a non-ranking system, but there's also so much information to provide that a delegator who's trying to make a decision might not, you can't absorb all that and might not care to absorb all that anyway. So things like that, where like that slashing concern, it's 10x, or, we've been talking about other ways of saying, is there a top limit on how much percentage or voting power a validator can get? And beyond that, you can't bond to them, or other types of things to try to say, I want to try to avoid crazy spikes. Which I know on the liquid staking side, I don't know if you guys, if when you guys enabled liquid, did it change dramatically the kind of the curve associated to the validator kind of distribution curve, or did it not make that big of a deal?
I don't think the superfluid really had a big impact as far as I can tell. I guess one thing that made superfluid a little bit different is like just because of some time reasons, we made it so you can only superfluid delegate to one validator instead of like to multiple at once.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that looking back would have said, if I have only one to choose, I'm going to choose somebody in the top 10. Right. Yeah. I'm not gonna put all these eggs into number 98 on the list, because there's this idea that quote unquote less secure, or like at risk, or which all these other types of things that come up with that, which is not really true.
Instead of ranking, so one of the things that we actually want to do on Osmosis to like kind of change a little bit of how the UX of staking works is, currently it's very annoying that like every time you want to like redelegate your rewards or something, you have to go like manually go to every single validator, say, okay, I want to delegate, 50 Osmo here, 20 here, 30 here, or whatever. And that's like very annoying process. When instead, what we want is actually, we want to like have this thing called validator set preferences, where on chain, you basically say, hey, I want to do 50% Kingnodes, 25% Lavender.Five, 25% RHINO or something, right? And then it'll be like, and then I just click one button. Every time I want to delegate my rewards, I just click delegate, and it will automatically do it to that distribution. And then I think once you have that kind of thing, then you can have these like sort of like, I don't know, validator, like suggestion, like groups, right? Where we could be like, oh, here's a bunch of validators that run relayers. Here's a proposed, you can say, you click that and it'll import that as your validator set preference. So you could be like, here's a bunch of, geographically distributed validators, and you click that and it'll import them as your preference, kind of thing.
So I was talking with Jake about this, like on-chain stuff, right? So I think like, the best thing is to be able to control this would be like protocol level controls, right? Because anything that you introduce outside of the network that is then controlled by someone else, right? And it's a central point of failure that can be manipulated. So I like that as a way to select your validator, Sunny, but like that would, in my mind, be able to be implemented at a network level as well. It would probably be difficult, and it would involve things like, maybe people have to, as a multi-sig or as a group, vote on which validators provide what services, etc. So another thought that I had was, and this has been talked about in various ways before, in terms of like limitation of the amount of stake that a single validator can get, because I don't necessarily mind that a validator get more stake, right? So that's not a problem to me. Like if you look at OA on Evmos, right, I was probably a little bit ahead of my understanding when I was like giving them a hard time on Twitter. But they are one of the biggest they're not a company, but they're one of the biggest entities doing anything on Evmos, right? And they're probably providing the bulk of value to Evmos, and they probably deserve to have a lot of the stake in Evmos, right, to support their business. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. The problem is the security in the chain, and it's not just it's voting, but it's more so if validators get too much weight and they fall over, then it can halt the network, right? So that's the real problem in my sense, is the fact that say at the moment there's on some networks it will only take the top 2 validators to fall over and then the network stops, right? On Evmos it's the top 4 or 5. So say if coincidentally they were all in the same data center and something happened to that, right, then the network shuts off and that's it. So an idea we had was that if you could find a way to make sure that the stake's distributed, but still provide like an allowance for people who market themselves and provide extra value, like incentivize good behaviors and value building, then that's a good avenue to go through as well. So, for example, we thought that, say, if you take the total available stake and divided it by the amount of validators, right? It's not fair to say that every validator gets the same amount of stake, but you could then apply like a multiplier, which could be a parameter on the network that, the maximum amount that any validator can have more than any other validator. So say you've got a multiplier by 6, and you say they can have 6 times more stake than what anyone else can have. And then that way you still might get more power at the top. There will be a curve where maybe the top 40 validators have more power than the rest of the network rather than the top 4. So, but there's so much stuff that comes along with that, like, what happens when people try to stake over that amount, or how do you control that, and all that various stuff. But that was some ideas we were thinking about. Does anyone have like any comments on that type of implementation on a way to control it rather than like an external body doing the control for you?
I mean, I kind of like the idea. It kind of falls within the idea of, CEO should only make, let's say, 100 times how much their lowest level employee should make. You've heard that thrown around all over the place. That's kind of the idea of what you're saying, right? Is that everyone starts at this multiplier of 1, and it's acceptable for the top person to be at a little bit higher of a multiplier.
Well, not necessarily. Everyone starts with, yes. So basically, if you set a multiplier of 6, right, then that is the maximum they can have. So say if you divided, I think I did some quick maths and said, like, if you've got 100 available tokens and you divided them by 135 and had a multiplier of 6, then, like, for the example, the top validator can't have more than 3 or 4% of the network weight.
Yeah.
And so I thought about some ideas about what might happen if they did, like, for example, instead of limiting the delegation, you might limit the amount of rewards that a single validator can get. And any rewards over that might get diverted to the community pool. And so their delegators will get like a lower amount of relative rewards compared to people who aren't over the limit. Or you could just redistribute it to the excess rewards to the rest of the set. Or you could just directly stop people from being able to delegate above a certain amount. And, there's other things like what happens if the set expands or contracts. You'd then have to impose those same rules against those. Say if the set expands, right, then the percent would reduce. So then you would have to still impose those penalties, even though people didn't, directly go and stake above their limit.
That'd be a good thing, though, right? Because then it would immediately incentivize those that are staking with the high people to then go to the newcomers, right? So then it would kind of level out that voting power and that security almost immediately.
Yeah, exactly. So people, they'd say, immediately realize that they're getting like a lower percentage of the rewards, and then they'd go and distribute their stake down to some other validators. So that was just me musing, while I was taking a crap. But I imagine something along those lines could work. And to me, that's like a more robust system than relying on other people to make subjective decisions on people's value.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I do think Asaf from Secret pointed this out in the chat as well. He said capping profits is usually not a good idea. And I do agree with that, because I think the one challenge with delegators, maybe, who knows what UI that they're actually looking at that shows in that data. So we might have something on Minscan that says, hey, or I don't know, in Kepler that says, hey, when you delegate here, your rewards might be lower because of XYZ. But there's nothing saying that the Cosmos Station wallet would do that, or, Ping, or there's so many ways to stake that. So you could get in a situation where a delegator's just picking a name out of a hat, and then they're getting lower rewards and they don't know why. Right. And so, because we don't have, not every UI is being able to show that. So that, I think that's a bit unfair. Now, blocking the transaction, and the transaction fails and you have an error message there, then that's a little bit more actionable, right? They can do something about that. But I agree. And I think, I don't know, it's just such a tough problem, because you also want to leave it as a free market, right? You want to be able to say, hey, this is, there's, who says it's 4%, and could it be 5% of the VP, or is it 8%, or like, does it matter by chain, right? And there's so many decisions related to that would that even a decision on chain A might not make a difference, or it might not be the same as on a different project, right? Because of specific reasons. Sunny, I have a question for you as a I don't think we've ever asked other project. I don't know what your title is, but as project leadership, let's say, or somebody who's heavily invested, right? So this idea of like delegation spread, right, and the curve of VP and those types of things, how much of a concern is that to the Osmosis ecosystem, as from a project perspective? Is it something that, why is it a concern? And like specifically, and I think the biggest question for me is, what does a perfect distribution look like? Like, what would you, if you had to say, all right, we get to lay it all out, and we think this is what we think is be the best thing for the project long term. Do you guys have do you have a definition of what that would be? Like, what does that look like? You're on mute.
Yeah. I think that I don't think necessarily a perfectly even distribution is what's needed, right? You want certain validators to be able to have more, because if they're contributing more to that network, that should be represented somehow. But I think what the biggest risk factors is just I think like you mentioned, who gets how many validators have to go down for the chain to be able to be paused or something, especially around upgrade times. That's when it gets kind of annoying, when there's when you sometimes have very large validators with a lot of voting power, but there's they're just consistently the ones that are MIA when you need them and stuff. And so that's sort of a problem, and being able to make sure that we don't have those points of failures on just a handful of validators is important. Yeah. So I think here's actually another mechanism you could use. This is actually something Polkadot came up with early on. I don't know if they actually did it or not. I haven't looked at it, but I remember they had this early idea of everyone selects the validators that they are okay with delegating to. Here's a list of all 20 validators that are on my trust list, and then it will automatically shuffle stake around to be maximally decentralized. With everyone, it'll take into account everyone's preferences and try to calculate a result that will be okay, here's a way that we can put everyone's only delegating to validators that they are okay with, but then it's still maximizing trying to make it as equal as possible.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
That's totally speaking my language. Approval voting is my favorite voting form. So if you're integrating that, That's the way I want to do it.
So do you guys worry about it from a governance perspective? I mean, the opposite side of the...
So the governance perspective is probably actually the thing we worry the most about but I think for that, we just need to make it so people can you shouldn't be having your validators take over all of people's votes. Like even if they do take over some of it, I think what it should do is maybe 25% of your vote gets given to the validator, can use 25% of your voting power. But then if you come vote, you use 100%. So that way there's even still an incentive to, even if you agree with the way that your validator voted, there's still then you should still go vote yourself as well, because that way you could use the full 100% of the voting power.
See, now you're speaking my language, because that's one of the areas that I've always had really just, I don't know, it's like clearly a validator power trip, I think, in some areas. But this idea that I get to vote non-voting shares at 100% always seems to be, honestly, in my eyes, it just never made sense to me. Like, I think voting at a lesser percent that makes total sense, or some sort of balance there, because I think my delegator's vote is as important as my viewpoint on it. And so I'm glad that when we both vote, we're both equal. But if they don't vote and I vote 100% of their shares, that always seemed like a little bit of a, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think somebody who votes should have more weight than my opinion on somebody who's not voting.
So, you guys mentioned worried about having this stuff happen at outside the protocol, I guess. So I mean, one of the things, for some of this stuff, for example, being able to being able to delegate your vote to other people other than your validator, right? This is something we've wanted to do in the governance module forever, but it's just something that we, on our priority stack, just hasn't been able to get that high up. But now with actually Auth-Z, you can actually do a lot of this stuff off chain. And I was talking to Tom from EcoStake, and so he built restake.app, and he was, we were just brainstorming what are other cool things he could do with it. One of them was hey, should he build a thing where you can, let's say you want to delegate your voting power, your governance to someone who's not a validator or not your validator, you should be able to can I just give Auth-Z access of my governance thing, and they could build a service that does that? So do you guys think it's dangerous to put this kind of stuff in these let someone restake.app build this as sort of a centralized service that makes use of Auth-Z kind of stuff? Or do you think that it's it is very important to have this natively on chain?
No, you're muted.
Auth-Z is still, in my opinion, on chain and auditable, right? So if you have, So if restake.app included some sort of, governance auths that you could delegate someone to do your governance for you, right? Or say there's this multi-sig that's super wrinkle brain and everyone wanted to give them their vote because they always make good decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
There could be another platform that audits that. They could have something that's an interface where it picks up the vote and what was done through Auth-Z and verifies it's just listed. It says they voted this and this is the wallets that were voted and this is the vote percent or something like that. So, I mean, if it is on chain, it is auditable, right? So whilst it might be through a centralized web interface, it's still on chain effectively, and you're still making those transactions to give that authorization on chain. So that, in my opinion, it's still on chain, not off chain. But I mean, everything is accessed. There's probably 98 to 99% of transactions on chain are accessed through a GUI that's developed by someone. It's not Tom and Terry Farmer doesn't come in and buy Osmosis on the CLI and then do some voting. So I guess everything, unless you're a validator or a developer, you're probably not going to use the CLI to do anything. So every other avenue into the blockchain is through a third-party built tool of some description.
And I guess some of the use case there would be that you might have governance groups that form. It's almost like a DAO at that point, right? You're almost get to the point where I'm authing my vote to some sort of group or individual that says, hey, the way this person is going to vote or this group is going to vote, I want to vote, right? So we have similar ideals and those types of things. So, which I guess somewhat happens today on the validator side, but maybe not quite, right? It's kind of the idea that's what's supposed to happen on the validator side. I think other use cases for Auth I think are great. I think that I always feel that anything that encourages voters to get involved and make their own decisions and vote is obviously better than trying to either Auth that out or letting a validator vote their shares. But if that means that you have more involvement and people are more active around picking groups or individuals that they're providing that responsibility to, then maybe that's a good thing.
I mean, yeah, ultimately it is a little bit difficult. Like if you concentrate any amount of vote into any one hand, right, then that hand can then be bribed or, have their nails pulled out or anything like that. So I suppose, for example, and Jacob would completely agree with me on this if he was here. One of the big problems with having a concentrated governance vote is being able to rob the community pool. There is a big incentive to be able to rob the community pool, right? So if you've got the voting power in the hands of 2 or 3 entities, it's not beyond belief that if that's a high value community pool, that someone could just go to their house and hold their family at gunpoint and pull their fingernails out and make them vote the way they want to vote, right? It's not even necessarily that they might be a bad actor. It's that there is enough vote there to do meaningful damage one way or another. So it's the same if you delegate that vote to John, and John lives in Kansas and he's like, doxed, then someone can just go around to John's place and make John vote the way they want John to vote. So I think any concentration of voting power anywhere is dangerous to me. No matter where.
I agree. I think that your point is apt, but I think that you're I would say you're missing the forest for the trees a little bit. You're talking about like violence getting to people and stuff. And I think that's true, but I think that just the social aspect of it is really simple. If you have the vote spread across 100 people, you have to convince 100 entities. You have to convince 100 entities to vote a certain way, right? If you have 3 people, you can just message them in DMs and say, hey, this is my project. It's pretty cool. And just being friendly, that's very convincing to people, right? So just sending a DM would be enough to sway their vote whenever before they were going to vote no. So yes, there's the violence aspect, but it's so much simpler than that. And I think that's kind of the scariest part of it to me.
Yeah, so I guess my example was probably a bit of an extreme in that, I guess the point of that was that it would make the whole of the community pool more vulnerable than if it was distributed. But definitely there is the social point of view, and I get people in my DMs trying to convince me of stuff when there is votes on things. I just say, look, don't DM me because ultimately I'm going to do my research and vote the way I want anyway. So you DMing me is not an influence. So just stop. But I imagine you'd get the same thing, Sunny, like with governance proposal. I imagine that before people put governance proposals up, you get a lot of people, trying to talk to you about them and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so Usurper, we had planned to talk about other things this week, right? Because I think we've kind of talked about this a fair bit now, and I think we all agree that there are some issues that need to be sort of looked at in a serious way, but I think the way forward is not really clear to anyone yet. Probably requires a lot more discourse and discussion throughout various Discords and Twitter and whatever else. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that we find a decent way to move forward with that doesn't penalise people for being active and providing extra value, but also like at least tries to distribute the weight in the stake weight. So I did actually bring up just there before was a graph from Blockpain's website that just shows the locations of validators. So I'm just going to pull it up again because I think this is quite interesting. I don't know how many people are aware that this exists, but this is Osmosis.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are so many different things that can happen with the internet, right? So this is Hetzner. Hetzner holds a lot of the validators for Osmosis. So if something catastrophic happened to the Hetzner system, I'm almost certain that Osmosis would cease to function until they sorted that out. And if you look at any of this locations over here, like Germany and the US, if there was something catastrophic that happened to the internet at either of those locations, then I'm almost certain that it would stop working.
And to be fair, this is not validators. This is all nodes, right? So, like this is all nodes that are participating. So it's not a validator specific thing. I think it's all nodes. So, but still, I mean, I'm guessing it'd probably be in a similar ratio. And we'll put a link to the show notes for people can check that out.
Yeah, that is a good point. So Usurper, let's talk about more pointed Osmosis things.
All right.
Do you want to lead us through that?
Yeah, Sunny, do you want to introduce yourself? Now that we're
sure.
46 minutes in.
Sure. Hey guys, my name is Sunny. I'm one of the co-founders of Osmosis. I've been working in Cosmos for about 5 years now. Started in summer of 2017 as an intern at the company previously known as AIB, and then Tendermint, and then Ignite, and then now something else. I don't know what it is anymore. So I've been working on Cosmos SDK and IBC and Tendermint for a long time. Kind of built out a lot of the tooling, these core tools, and once all of them were kind of ready, we were like, well, let's try to build an actual application with them. And so that's kind of started working on Osmosis as sort of the first obvious thing to build.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we were slightly talking about before was like this role of governance and taking action, those types of things. And this podcast, we've talked a lot about Juno Prop 16, right? And like actually making a mutable change to something that occurred, right? And then what I was going to say with what Mel just said around, look, these groups and these validator conversations and this governance conversation will continue. And I hope it continues quickly, because this is the time to do it when there's not like an emergency in front of you, right? Where you don't really have a Bill of Rights or a group or some things, like some specific rules that I think there's agreed upon that, there's as validators or as chain operators, et cetera. So you guys, we just had a halt, right? We saw each other in consensus, and like that night before, we saw the war room pictures and like all the things that were going on. And I think you guys were also, if I remember correctly, there's 4 accounts. I think we talked about this. There were 4 accounts that were kind of larger numbers, and 2 of them came forward, and there's another 2. And was there some talk about making a chain state change or anything else associated with that? Or do you guys even talk about that and saying, what do we want to do about this, or not really in that sense?
Not really. I mean, I think for us, we kind of highly valued the immutability of the chain. I guess there was some talk, I guess, about potentially like freezing accounts, that not like seizing assets from the accounts, but just making it so those accounts couldn't transfer, and then like letting governance figure out what it wants to do, or at least giving them. But it just got very messy for us because like it was unclear to us like by what authority do we as the dev team get to decide to freeze these accounts. And a couple options that we were floating around was potentially just restarting the chain with only governance enabled, and all other functionality is disabled, and then governance can figure out what it wants to do from there. Other options were we put out multiple copies of the code, one that has account frozen, one that doesn't, and then we just let validators decide which version of the code they want to run, and we don't make any recommendations. In the end, yeah.
Can I interrupt real quick? What are you talking about with 4 accounts, 4 big accounts? What happened there?
So maybe I can give some background on that.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So there was a bug on the V9 upgrade of Osmosis. It basically allowed LP every time you join a pool, it gave you more LP shares than you were supposed to have. A few accounts. Yeah.
Okay, I know what we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, and a few accounts got. There's a handful of accounts, like more than 4. Those are around like 6 or 7 that like exploited the bug, where like they would add, withdraw, add again, withdraw, and basically cycle that and get a lot of assets out. A lot of the funds had actually been fully returned. But yeah, so I don't know. I guess, yeah. I mean, we like floated the idea, but I think what we were realizing was it's like, at the amount that was lost, which was like, at about $5.5 million, I think we valued the immutability of the chain higher. And we were like, we would rather actually the foundation cover that full cost than like go make irregular state changes to the chain.
That's also kind of there's some timing that worked out in that favor as well, right? Because this is last week, and we're where we are from in this winter that we're living in. It's crypto winter was so bad that even Null had to put a coat on for this call. That's how cold it is here. But if we were not in that situation, right, and we were 10x where we are, would that decision change?
I think it's a big. Yeah, I mean, look, if it was 10x where we are, I don't think the foundation would not be able to. There's an amount that the foundation has a treasury of that it can cover. The other thing, though, as well, is it's also. I think it's more important as a percentage of the network. Yeah, of the liquidity, right? Like, the hack was, it's high, but realistically, it was actually less than like 2.5% of the TVL of Osmosis. Sure. And so is doing in a regular. I don't think it was at any point. I don't think it was like an existential like threat to Osmosis.
Right.
If it was like, if we're talking, it was like 50%, 75% of Osmosis's TVL, then yeah, I think, at that point there's like an existential threat to Osmosis that maybe then does justify more drastic action.
Yeah. Well, and I think that in that, like there's some decisioning there, right? And so now like that helps you look back, I think, as we talk through these governance type of things, like what would be that percentage? Like where does it become a threat where we would, kind of, it's tough that it's always interesting to have like a viewpoint and some kind of like guidelines around this, but there's at some point, I think all those guidelines sometimes go out the window, right? Because there's just so much of a threat that it needs to happen. Yeah. So I know you went through a bit of a root cause at OsmoCon. There's a YouTube video of that up, and you kind of talked a little bit around that. Have you guys published like an in-depth root cause analysis of what actually failed? And I think the follow-up to that is like, what can validators do? Like how we talked about this, I think, also back on the Juno issue with Prop 20 when there was a mistake on the burn address, or not the burn address, but the transfer address in the contract. And like, how do we build like better processes for making sure that those types of things don't happen? Right.
So we'll do a proper we're still working on like a full bug report that kind of explains like, hey, here's exactly what went wrong. I mean, it was kind of simple. It was what was happening was when you do an add liquidity, basically it does what it does is it takes, you have 2 assets, but they're not exactly at the same ratio as the spot price of the pool. So what it would do is it would do two steps. It would first take 50%, it would match the even amount based off of the smaller asset, and then it would take the excess and then do a trade against the pool to like get it to a 50-50 and then add the rest in. And just in that calculation, we double counted the larger side basically. And so that's what caused it to have slightly more, that's what caused it to give out 50% more LP shares. This was, I mean, there's the bug itself, but I think what's more important is like why the bug got in. I think that there's like a lot of, I think part of it was like, I'll admit that I think our team was rushing quite a bit in the last like 1 month, ever since like the Terra collapse. Basically, there's been this like new slew of like developers coming on to Osmosis, and we were kind of, we kind of rushed this V9 upgrade because we wanted to get the token factory module in, so that way these developers could start doing stuff with it. And I think we didn't go through like the normal testing processes we normally do, or like we didn't connect the front end to the test net in the way how we normally would. Right. And so there's all these sort of things that like, we kind of didn't do properly. And then in general, I think the biggest thing that's important going forward though is like making sure we have more better documentation and like understandability of the code. Like I think right now, there's the Linus Torvald quote about like, given enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. And like right now it's hard to get more eyes on the code just because it is sort of not as well documented as we would like. And so one thing we did with Validators on the V10 upgrade was we kind of like we did a Zoom call where we walked through like, hey, here's all the changes, here's the bug, here's all the changes that we're making as part of this upgrade. And that's like really helpful because like it just gives more people who are able to ask questions. One of the validators who used to be an auditor, he was like providing some feedback of like, hey, I think you can improve your like the way you do like the tests here and stuff. So that was really helpful. And just in general, like I think having better code comments and stuff is like, so when other people are doing code reviews, when we're merging PRs, I think that's like, without these like comments and stuff, it's hard to do proper code review. So basically we're doing a couple sprints right now where we're not like working on new features or anything. We're just like spending the next couple sprints just on improving our docs and comments and test coverage and stuff. So
Sunny, just on like testing and code commenting, right? And I mean, unless you're like a bit of a gun on Go, it's basically unreadable to anyone. So like I started to learn coding like back when I was before uni, right? And when they were teaching me, like they used to teach that, without comments, things are very hard to come back and look at later on. And structuring code and all that type of stuff. Like, do you think that nowadays that's not really that prevalent, that people are looking at their code from the point of view of other people being able to read it later and being able to work on it later and commenting and providing like context for other modules and stuff that it interacts with and that type of stuff?
I mean, it's not like we're not doing it. I think we could definitely be doing a better job at it. Yeah. Like some of the modules that we've written, I think it'll be very difficult for someone else to come pick it up and like start. It's very difficult. And part of it is, I think the Cosmos SDK has a lot of room for improvement on just like, there's just so much boilerplate code in the Cosmos SDK that makes it very hard to like review things and like follow along with what's going on. Like removing a lot of that boilerplate, I think is like a big sort of design goal for the Cosmos SDK.
So could you maybe just walk us through a little bit about the design process at Osmosis? Because you guys are obviously all in the same, well, mostly probably all in the same area and work out of a location, right?
No, we're like fully geo-distributed
Decentralized?
across
Yeah.
everywhere.
So do you guys do like do you develop like pseudocode and flows and stuff before you actually start coding? Like, is there a process about how you look at what you want to do and then, you know, modularize it and do various bits and pieces and organize it before you start coding? Or are you guys just straight into it and then debug?
We'll usually try to write a spec, like be like, okay, here's the general messages that we want. But it's definitely not as low level as definitely nowhere close to like pseudocode and like here's what we'll be doing. It's more of like sort of interface design first and then going and implementing stuff. So, these are things that we're going to be trying to improve on. And like, oftentimes, like, yeah, I think we've just been putting a lot of emphasis on like velocity and just like speed of getting things shipped. And I think that we need to like be a little bit slower on that and like make sure we're spending like ideally we want all these like workflows like and everything, but like we just didn't have them because of that, we were trying to get stuff out faster basically.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the upgrade that had this issue, there was quite a big refactor that went on in that
in the
upgrade,
AMM
right?
module. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was sort of a generalization of the AMM module where earlier version of the AMM module, like it was only for like the current balancer style AMMs, but then we basically made an interface for AMM so that way we can add other pool types like the stable swap and things like that. So that's sort of why. Yeah, but then we actually removed the stable swap code from the upgrade because we realized that we didn't have enough time to like test it properly. But we didn't. We kept the actual refactor itself of the AMM when that wasn't really the main part of the thing. Was like that wasn't really the main focus of this upgrade. We had spent like, which is why the main thing was the token factory and stuff. And that's what we had spent a lot of time testing. And then even within the refactor, like we made big changes to how single-sided liquidity adding works. And so we had a lot of tests written for that, but not for like the very simple things, which we thought like, hey, we didn't actually change the functionality here.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So going forward, like especially on big refactors and added like functionality, do you guys plan to like have a gateway process where you have to meet certain criteria before you're going to push things to the mainnet? Like for example, going to your testnet, getting certain amount of volume of testing on certain functionality before you even think about pushing it to a mainnet rather than reducing the YOLO approach a little bit?
Yeah, we're definitely going to have like more, have the testnet running for longer. Like I think this time the testnet was running for like a day or two before we did the upgrade. And like I said, we didn't connect the front end to it. So it's kind of it was hard for anyone to really test against it. On top of that, just working like thinking about like new like testing models to make sure things are tested. One of our advisors was telling us about this like thing called mutation testing, where what it does is it like modifies your code and checks to make sure that tests should break if it modifies your code. And so that's like a way of testing to make sure your test actually had enough coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it would be quite difficult to build like a test suite to automatically test like all the different scenarios in like these networks.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be really hard, and it would break every time you like made an upgrade.
One thing that we a tool that's like in our toolkit that we kind of have haven't used because basically I think the SDK needs to like go. We need to go like improve it again, which is the simulator. So the simulator, It basically allows you to like, it'll automatically spam different transactions, and you can set invariants that will check that like, hey, these are invariants that should be broken. We, earlier on, we were using it pretty heavily, but then it just became sort of like unwieldy and unmaintainable that we kind of like stopped using it. And so I think we need to go spend time on like fixing the problems that we had with the simulator so we can make it so we can start using it again.
A simulator is something.
Oh, we lost him.
I think that you would need to build code, right? Like you wouldn't be able to leave it. You couldn't do a month of development and then go back and, if you really want your simulator to be robust, you would need to pretty much do it in parallel with your code development, in my opinion.
Basically what we would need to do is like make it so anytime PRs are merged, it has to come with like, the proper simulator changes as well. Right.
Yeah, for sure. So keep in mind all this I'm not a coder. I'm just, I'm only talking about what I know about. So I'm going to sit back and see if Schultze or Usurper have any more to say on that particular subject.
I'm definitely a little curious. I know, Sunny, you and the Osmosis team have gotten a little bit of flack for not having enough test coverage. I'm curious what test coverage looks like in the blockchain space right now, and if there's any sort of like QA process that's normalized, if there's, I don't think I've ever seen a blockchain test engineer, right? Mm-hmm. Is that just considered kind of uncommon at this point, at this time in the blockchain ecosystem?
I'm not really sure like how other chains do it, but I mean, yeah, like I said, we're going to be adding like, we're hiring someone to just do QA, like in the sense that like, hey, just playing around like with the test net basically, and like using the UI and like just trying to find bugs, not just on the chain side, but also like on the front end side, and make sure those bugs are like found before they go to prod basically. Like, we did that big giant like front end refactor, and like, it went pretty smoothly, but like, even once we pushed the prod, there was like all these like, got a lot of bug reports and stuff that we were able to fix. But like having that stuff like be found before then is important. Yeah, I'm not sure what the standards are on other chains, to be honest. I mean, part of it is that like, we've been trying to move faster than like other chains where, things like Ethereum have these like really long development life cycles where they like upgrade once, a year at best. And I know they spend a lot of time testing everything. They have like months and months of test nets before anything goes live. So, I think, we're probably going to want to like slow down. I think we've been trying to aim for like almost like one upgrade every 1.5 months. And so we have to figure out how to like either slow that down or be like, figure out how to like, just kind of like planning for like what goes into upgrades better.
Yeah, and now that the functionality is growing, we'll talk. I think we can switch gears and talk a little bit about the future as well. But that functionality is going to keep growing, and so this idea of a growing regression test suite absolutely needs to be there, right? I mean, now you're going to have these modules are not independent, right? Now there's a lot more integration between modules, and you're going to have lending and all these other types of things that we're talking about, and they're going to have integration across the board. Yep. Where even the simple, like you said in this one, this was like you were testing new parts of that bonding, but not the very simple use cases, right? That's a regression test, right? That's all that is. And so now, then that starting needs to be building into those release plans and everything else. It's like turning into a big company, right? So you got all these growing pain type things. But we talked about this a few weeks ago too, and when Juno Prop 20 or 21 came around, and I think the conversation with here is it better to move fast and break things, or is it better to and be able to fix things as they come, or is it better to have really long breaks in there where you're doing months and months of testing? And I think every chain will find the balance between those two, right? Like just depending on what you guys are doing, what's going on. So So switching gears, go ahead. No, say please.
I was just saying, I think, well, I can just kind of relate into the, while you're like the future stuff. But it's like,
Yeah.
I think one thing, a nice thing with like the bear market is we can move a little bit slower, and like I feel, and they kind of relate to like feature development as well, in the sense that like there's all these like features that like we've wanted to build, but we know these are like long time frame things. They're going to take on the order of like 3 to 6 months. But we kept prioritizing the 1 or 2 month like faster wins instead of those like longer term things. But now we can go spend time on these like more long term things.
Let's talk about those long term things. So you want to talk about like what's coming up next and some of the plans and thoughts related to that? I know these guys had some questions related to that too.
Yeah, sure. So we have a couple of things coming up. One, for example, is the threshold encryption, right? That's like a long-term thing that was actually the original reason why Osmosis was started, was we wanted to build like privacy in the mempool, so that way there's no front running that could happen. And so we designed this whole threshold encryption solution, and then we've build out pieces of it, but like it's just something we know is a 6-month long project, so we haven't been able to dedicate fully towards like making sure that's like what we're shipping. So that's one. But then there's also like order books. Definitely, I think that passive AMMs are good for the tail end and bootstrapping of new markets, which is what a lot of the Cosmos ecosystem has been right now. But that as we bring in assets like ETH and WBTC and all these like larger assets, we need more better use of the liquidity than like AMMs can provide, and traditional AMMs can provide. So definitely going down like building an order book style system. It's going to end up looking more like Uniswap v3 more than like what that's like Uniswap v3 is the right way to build on-chain order books, basically. So that's kind of, we're going to be building that out.
So take a second to describe that. That's you're basically creating a swap situation between, it's almost like a limit order, if I understand it correctly, right? You're setting like a boundary to say, I'm okay to swap as long as that it's within this area, right? So I'm not, is that right? Is that a layman's version of that?
Yeah. So what it is so how Uniswap v3 works is when you put you in a normal AMM, you put your liquidity, you're basically putting your liquidity on this like full range. You can imagine like you're basically putting it full range, where like you're saying that, hey, your market making, no matter what the price goes to, you want to maintain some ratio, 50-50 ratio at all prices. What a concentrated liquidity would say is, hey, it's like, let's say this is a pool for a stablecoin pair, right? We have our stable swap that should be coming much sooner, but like another way you could do it is you can just say, hey, I'm going to put all my liquidity in this tight band of between like 95 cents and $1.05. And that way, what will happen is if you're basically using all your liquidity there, that decreases the slippage in that bound. But if the price goes outside of that band, you end up holding all of one of the assets. So the less work. And so this is actually, and what will usually happen is, market makers will keep readjusting which bands they're providing liquidity over. But if you want to be more passive, you can do that as well. You can say, hey, I want to be a liquidity provider over a wider band, or even full range if you want. One thing you could do though is these things are if you notice, it's kind of like a limit order, where if let's say the price is at $1, you have a band from like $1.05 or $1.10. And then if the price goes up to $1.20, you end up holding all of the token at that $1.10 price. But the problem is, if the price goes back through the other direction, you end up undoing that trade, because you're LPing, you're making the market on both sides. What you could do is, if you wanted to, you could have it act more like a limit order, where you say, okay, once it passes through the tick one time, remove liquidity from that. If you wanted to, you can have it automatically removed from that pool, and that it acts like a limit order, basically. And so it's nice, is because what it basically is a way of building these like kind of limit orders on top of in AMM.
Mhm.
Now, the reason this is better than like a traditional order book is like it's unclear whether traditional order books can actually scale on blockchains, right? Like even your centralized exchanges throw their like clusters of GPUs at peak times of peak throughput, and they struggle to keep up, right? And like on Solana, Serum works at normal times, but unclear if it works at peak times. You know, I mean, DYDX, you know, I mean, we saw that they just announced that they're coming to Cosmos. So
Yeah.
I mean, what they're doing though is to solve this, is they're actually not running the order book on chain. They're going to be running order books in the mempools. Every validator sort of has their own mempool order book, and then only settled trades go on chain. I think that actually probably will help solve a lot of the scalability problems. I think that comes with a huge host of MEV problems. But the concentrated liquidity design is what it allows you to do is it allows you to do bigger tick sizes. So let's say instead of like 0.1 cent ticks, it will be 1 cent ticks, but because intra tick there is built-in slippage. So it'll basically is a way of making on-chain order books more scalable.
So with that, would you have been able to protect yourself in some fashion from the Terra Luna drop if you had set it such that if Terra goes from $90 to $85, you exit the pool automatically? Is that a potential thing you could?
That would actually be a little bit different. That would be more like a stop order, not a limit order. A limit order would be worse because you would have, let's say you were a limit order in the let's say there was a USDC UST pool, or let's say there was the UST euro pool, right? You might have been on a much tighter bound, and you could have actually lost more because you concentrated your liquidity more there. Stop orders are slightly different, which, there is a team building them on Osmosis right now called Autonomy. And I think stop orders will get better, especially when you can start to put them on chain with like threshold encryption. The problem with putting them on chain directly right now is there's people are going to go stop order hunting, where, they're going to see the kind of like what's happening on Ethereum right now with all these like liquidation hunting. It's going to be like similar with like the stop orders as well.
Okay. And what's beyond that, Sunny? What's next after that?
Oh, yeah. Some other stuff, more like better UX features around like wallet and custody, basically. Like, things where, session keys, for example, where you should have like different keys that all for the same account, but they have like different capabilities to them, right? And like sort of like using auth-z, but you can be like, hey, this key has the, it can be in the browser rather than in the wallet, but it can do trades, but only up to like 5% of your net portfolio. Otherwise it, requires a signature from the wallet. And that way, so you don't have to like pop out your ledger every time you want to do a single trade or something like that. So I think that UX experience is like really important. There's also going to be things like, like better, like the smart wallet integrations, like social recovery style stuff. So yeah, I think that's one. And then also just like new user flows, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like currently Osmosis is very much like the centralized exchange experience, which is like, hey, you come deposit assets, you do your trades, and then you withdraw.
Yes.
But we want we also want like the shapeshift style experience, which is like, hey, I have ETH on Ethereum, I want AVAX on Avalanche. How do I do that in a single click? Not have to do like all these multiple hops, especially if these users don't even have Kepler or something installed. All they have is like MetaMask. So that's something we're working on with the Axelar team of building that out as sort of like a full joint product together.
Sonny, would that also be within the Cosmos? Like, could you?
Yeah. So it'll be the same where like, look, you have Juno on Juno and you want stars on Stargaze. So, that should all just be a single click.
Me trying to explain the difference between Juno's native chain and Juno on Osmosis to my brother-in-law is like, that's like a 4-day conversation, right? Like I'm depositing it. We're depositing it. Like even, and the same thing with, I think another thing you were talking about before was on-ramp, which is going through the whole process of getting into Atom and then bringing that in. What does it mean to deposit and everything else? Like you have to get over, there's some real mental hurdles there to get over. And I think lowering those barriers, I think opens up a giant swath of population, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, I think that one of the things kind of holding back the communication there is just how cheap it is to IBC. I was trying to explain what depositing was to someone, and they just thought, change wallets. Well, if you're talking about depositing from like Ethereum to AVAX, then we're talking $10. Now suddenly there's like an impact, right?
Yeah,
right.
So the fact that it's cheap just really enters this weird like dissonance.
We've been spoiled by how good the UX of IBC is, where it's like, oh, okay, if every time you have to do a bridged thing, it's like, oh, it's so cheap and fast, it doesn't really matter. But then it's like when we're trying to like deposit from Ethereum, it's like, oh man, I have to wait like 20 minutes and like
I gotta think about this.
Yeah,
I really gotta be planful. Am I moving this or not?
So I guess like definitely with IBC coins, the web of IBC coins is like just going to get more and more confusing to people. Where like unwinding. So we've talked about this before, Sunny, where IBC is very much a thing where you need to go back and forth across the same bridge between chains. Otherwise, it really starts to get like convoluted in terms of if you send an IBC, say from Juno to say you send a Juno from Juno chain to Osmosis chain, and now you've got an IBC Juno coin on Osmosis specific to that channel, and then you send it to like the Cosmos through another channel on another relayer, then you start to end up with a thing that you need to unwind at some point, which I think has been avoided like 100% to this point through UIs only really being able to withdraw a deposit back through those original chains. But so with your plan of making improving the user experience and being able to, for example, one click have a Juno come from Juno chain to become a star on Stargaze, right? To me, that actually sounds like quite a complex operation. And would that be the kind of thing that you would want to achieve through like ICA? Or is that something that would be a chain of events? Because approving a chain of events like that, if you use a ledger, would probably be an enormous pain in the ass, right? And even if you're just using Kepler, you'd be sitting there pressing the friggin' button like 10 times.
No. So this would be the idea. It would be a single transaction that you make, and then it like sort of encodes the rest of the actions in that initial transaction. So it would be like you make your first transaction on Juno, and the entire transaction execution path is like there, where it's like, okay, IBC to Osmosis, swap for stars, take however much stars you get out, and send it to this address on Stargaze. So it'll be like a full end-to-end sort of thing.
So just so my chicken fillet brain can understand this, right? Is this so? Would this be a process whereby you give your custody, you give your token custody to like a smart contract or something that would undertake those actions, or is this some sort of module that can now?
This would just be all like client side, where we would just so what it would do is we would create a new ICS, a new interchain standard, which is for this, and your website or whatever front end you're interacting with, it will just generate the entire transaction, and it will get you to sign it once, and then it will do the rest of the action. So this shouldn't require CosmWasm or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I'd very much like to So, have you already written a spec for that, or?
No, this is something that I think right now we're not starting with the IBC version. We're starting with the Axelar version, just because the Axelar team is sort of building out a lot of that actual swap system, because they actually have a lot of the prerequisites for that already built, because that's how they do their deposit addresses already, where how it works is like Axelar has this feature where you can say, hey, I want to send coins to like this Osmosis address, but then it will do is generate an address and you just send coins to it. And what it does is it maps the address that you send to with the user flow, the action that you want, which is send to Osmosis. But what they're able to do then is they can map that address to something even more complicated, which is like do a swap and then send to some destination address. So we're going to be sort of piggybacking off of their infrastructure that they've built right now for the Axelar thing. And then after that, we'll have it work on like native IBC stuff as well.
Cool, man. It sounds like a very difficult and complex project to undertake.
Yeah. But we're excited to be doing it. I think the Axelar team has built the right infrastructure to make it possible.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Unless someone else wants to jump in, I had like a brief question you touched on earlier, Sunny, about I can't remember the term used exactly, but like anonymity in the mempool, so that you can't be front run. Is that to do with bots?
Yes.
And so you're like introducing some improvements to be able to try and stop the bot front running that's going on at the moment.
Yep. Has there been much bot front? Have you noticed bot front running on Osmosis? I'm curious to see if anyone's doing it.
I've heard about it. I've heard complaints about it draining pools. But I don't look into the transactions enough to be able to verify anything myself. But I've certainly heard some people complain about it draining pools. So, yeah. So I think that there probably is people doing bot stuff on Osmosis. We're to exploit. Oh, sorry.
Say that one more time. Yeah, you're back.
So I think like wherever there's an opportunity to do bot stuff, people will do bot stuff. And that's just, where there's an opportunity to profit from something, people will be out there trying to profit from it, right? So while ever there's
there he goes again.
Frickin' Australia.
The internet froze over there,
I think so.
Stop talking.
No, he's back. He's back.
In general, I think I'm happy. I think it's fine for people to start running these bots and stuff right now because, we shouldn't rely on the altruism of people to solve it. We need to fix the stuff at the protocol layer through things like threshold encryption. And, I think in a funny way, it might be good for people to do some front running on Osmosis. So that way, once we solve it with threshold encryption, people like the solution where, there's no pain, there's no point of painkillers. So, we need to show people that, okay, this MEV issue is actually a big issue. And then look, here's the solution.
There's the name of the episode, Usurper, Painkillers for bot stuff.
Right. The other thing that's kind of funny is I think it's a delay or something else. But when you say bot stuff, it sounds like butt stuff. And so that's even it's a little bit of accent in there. So painkillers for butt stuff might be, I don't know. We might get flagged for that one though.
May or may not have been on purpose.
All right. Should we wrap up?
Yeah. So we're getting real close to where we want to be. So let's wrap up. Usurper, you're good at this.
Well, is there, maybe we could do what are you guys excited about? So one thing we kind of wrap up with is a simple question. Like, what are you excited about in the Cosmos ecosystem this week? Is there anything coming up in the next here between now and the next Wednesday or so?
I'm excited about the pixels on Osmosis. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it. Yeah, we've been.
I will admit, while I'm on this chat, I'm also like on the side drawing a little Wasmington on the pixels as well. Like waiting for every minute, I'm just like making one dot. It's addicting and kind of fun. So yeah, I guess that was kind of fun, and also just like it was supposed to be like it was our birthday surprise for Osmosis, so it was our 1 year anniversary. So that was really just exciting to see how far we've come in the last year, and just excited to be going further.
Yep.
So firstly, I'm disappointed that we have to end this because I've still got just like probably a list of stuff that I could sit here and keep asking. So damn it. But so my thing that I'm excited about this week is it'll be close to the heart of 80% of the validators out there. And I don't know if it's going to be done in the next week, but our friend Blockpain is building Tender Duty V2. And that was funded, I believe, from an Osmosis grant. And whatever it wasn't enough. This is probably the one tool that I think is commonly used just across so many validators, across so much of Osmosis, and of Cosmos. And we saw a preview yesterday. Schultze, Usurper, and myself would have seen a little snippet of a preview from it yesterday. And it's looking real nice, and I'm excited for that.
Nice.
Yeah, really cool. Schultze?
Yeah, so I'm in the Interchain's Developer Academy right now, and tomorrow's the completion of it, and so the final exam starts. But I don't know. I guess I'm just really excited to have been a part of it. Because of it, I've been having a lot of really great developer discussions with people and potentially going out for grant work or...
What is the Interchain Developers Academy? I'm actually not too familiar.
Yeah, so the ICF is funding, I think it was 150 developers to go through this course. I think it's academy.cosmos.network. And they just provide a step-by-step way of building your own chain, writing Cosmosm, messing with Cosm.js. There's tests, there's dedicated teachers. Anytime you have a question, you can just ask a question in dedicated chats. Really fantastic. I really enjoy it. And this isn't really for next week, but I'm just really excited to have been a part of it. It was a really great experience.
Nice.
Can you flunk it?
You can flunk it. So the first 2 weeks, yes. So there's 2 tests in the beginning, and then there is a final exam. I think the final exam is really the only one you can flunk. And the first 2 are more of like gates for like whether you actually are like engaged in the academy or not. There's also a pre-test to get in, so you actually have to like have some developer experience to be accepted. Yeah, I think you can. And part of that is because they'll help you like get a job like once you've actually graduated. So if you pass the final exam, you do the final project, then they're going to actively like there's already job like interviews going out and stuff.
Cool.
Very cool.
That's cool.
Well,
man.
if anyone from there is listening and wants to, we're definitely still hiring at Osmosis, so reach out.
Well, there might be some, I think there's plenty of people hurting at the moment with busted financials. So could be a lot of people looking for jobs. So just before we jump to you, Usurper, I just want to touch on this from Adam Burke. What does Tender Duty do? So really quickly, Tender Duty is just it's at the moment it's a Docker container or just a daemon that runs, and it will connect to a RPC node somewhere. So it'll just connect to the network, and it'll basically just ask the network every single block, did the validator sign that block? And you give the program the validator address. It's a really simple program. It just asks every block, did he vote? Did he vote? Did he vote? And if it doesn't, it returns and says he didn't vote. Then it sends an alert through a very commonly used alerting system called PagerDuty. And you get that alert on your phone. You can set a threshold. So you can say, if I don't sign 5 blocks, send me an alert. And it's a really good early warning system for validators if they start to not vote. So a lot of the other systems that we use is more reactive later on, where we might be getting high memory usage or something like that. Some of the other systems we use might give us early indicators. Other things might be catastrophic indicators that are like, something's failed. But Tender Duty specifically monitors your signing. So as soon as you stop signing, you can be straight onto it. And that might be that your node exploded, or it might be that, there's some other issue with your signer or something like that. But it gives you an avenue to start get in there straight away and start looking at the cause of the issue. So Usurper, what are you excited about, brother?
You're gonna rug me here, aren't you? That's okay. You're welcome
we're not
to.
rugging this week.
You're more than welcome to. one more thing on the tender, I think the one thing I think that everybody, at least who runs it, really appreciates about it is that it's the lowest level you can get to having a notification that something is actually wrong. There's no the other points of failures and other things like Grafana or Zabbix, or you have an agent, or you have all this kind of crap. You have a network outage and all this type of stuff. If you can run multiple of these as well, which I do. I run one in our colo and one outside our colo. Things like that, where you get a pretty. If that thing is going off, something's wrong. It's time to get off your butt. So that makes it extremely valuable. So I'm really glad that Todd has received that from you guys at the Osmosis Foundation. Is that right? And it's going to be awesome. So I'm really excited about it. It's just going to help uptime, I think, across the board.
It's actually from the Osmosis Grant program, not
Thank you.
Foundation.
I knew it was the wrong term as soon as I said it. Yeah, please.
Oh, sorry. Just on that, Grant, I have to say that Todd is so honourable that when he put in for that grant, he said no payment until delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost I think every other grant I've seen in there is some upfront and then some on delivery. And this guy is so honourable that he said nothing until I deliver the product. So that's how good of a bloke he is. And he's hurting at the moment and he's still happy to do that. So sorry, Seb, continue, mate.
That's okay. Plus I gave him hell because he's building a $100,000 product for a $10K grant. I was like, you got to work in this over time. Like like what he's building, I think it's going to be awesome. So I don't have much in terms of testnets or the types of stuff that's going on in the ecosystem. I think everything's been moving pretty smoothly. There's a lot of projects that are starting to kind of fire up, new test nets and things like that. I think the only thing that's exciting about this week, I think we're kind of led the conversation around with the governance piece of things and just starting to have better conversations both with, with Jake at the RHINO and this Validator Commons thing and everything else. I think there's a lot of just conversation around it. So I think this is a good topic for us to keep bringing up on Gaming Nodes with everybody who comes on, because I think there's so many valid viewpoints in here. It's tough to even quantify the problem, much less talk about solutions. But the more little solutions you hear, like what Sunny said earlier around, the slashing idea or other types of things, those are just good solutions to throw into the pot. And, as a problem gets identified, I think start pulling those things up to say, okay, what do we have from this bag that works? That's cool. I think it's really good.
So just finally, there is a couple of networks launching in the next week, I'm pretty sure. So there's T-Grade, which goes live, I think, on the 27th. I'm pretty excited about that, actually. And there is also, I think, Kujira is going to be launching imminently. I think it's maybe a week within the next week. So two more that we're excited about. So thanks, everyone, for coming on. And thank you, Sunny, for joining us, mate, even though you were late.
Thanks, Sunny.
But it's been really good to be able to talk to you and pick your brain on various things. And I would love to have you back again sometime, because I'm sure we've still got just thousands of questions to ask. Particularly, I'm sure Frey will get into some deep philosophical conversation about some random guy from 2,000 years ago that decided about or something. So thanks, everyone, for coming on, and thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you all next week.